All right, well, I'm happy to have everyone here. This is going to be a great webinar. I think we'll have a great time looking at some pretty cool features of Tableau that are available now, and some interesting uses of what we can do. So we'll get into that here in just a little bit. First, a couple of announcements. One thing is the Tableau Blueprint Virtual Interactive Workshop is coming up. So this webinar series is hosted by Teknion Data Solutions, and the Tableau Blueprint Workshop will also be hosted. It will be next Thursday, November 12th, 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. That is Central Time. So do check that out. The idea there is that it will be fully interactive. It will be a Zoom meeting and not just a Zoom webinar like what we're doing here. Uh, so do check that out. That should be really cool. And then also, just to kick us off, we have a couple of poll questions because everyone loves voting, and if you haven't had enough of that recently, we're going to pop that up on the screen so that you can just answer these really quickly. I'll give everyone just a couple of minutes to do that. But the idea here is that we just want to understand who all is attending our webinar, what you're doing with Tableau, and how we can better help you. All right, so amazingly, we have already counted the results. You wouldn't have thought that would be possible to count that quickly, but we did. And there you go. So you can even see those. I think one more question may be coming here. All right, just a few more seconds on this question. All right, and there's the results just for everyone to see on that. All right, well, thank you all for that interactivity. That'll be fun. I'm excited today to talk to you about some data scaffolding techniques. We'll talk about what that even means. I am Joshua Milligan. There is some of my contact information. I would love for you to reach out to me. I love making connections and helping wherever I can. I am a 5-time Zen Master. In fact, I'm a Hall of Fame Zen Master, which is an incredible honor from Tableau. And so I'm excited to just learn more, do more, and help more with Tableau specifically. I am a principal consultant at Teknion Data Solutions, so I get to do that in my day job as well, helping clients see and understand their data. We're going to talk about scaffolding with Tableau Data Model. A few house cleaning things first. Yes, we are recording, so there will be a recording available. You should get a link via email. Also, here it is. Don't worry about capturing it necessarily because you should get it. But if you're ever interested in seeing archives of previous webinars, you can do that as well. There also is a Q&A box. So as I'm going through this webinar, if you have a question, definitely feel free to enter it at any time. I'll try to reserve some time at the end to cover most of them, and then anything that we're not able to get to, I'll try to touch base offline. So scaffolding with Tableau Data Model. What is scaffolding? Well, scaffolding is the idea that I'm going to generate data to create different constructs or different places to build visualizations or reports, and we'll look at variations of that. And what is Tableau Data Model? Well, that is the new feature in Tableau. So starting with 2020.2, you now have the ability to create relationships within your data connections. We'll take a look at that today. There was a previous webinar that we did that covered it more extensively. So if you want to go back and brush up on the feature itself, today we're going to look at some application of the feature. And specifically, we'll be looking at things like domain completion. So the idea that maybe I have a partial set of data, so a few dates or a few states or a few departments, but I know the full list and I've got that somewhere. I can use data model to actually use that full list as part of my data set. We'll talk about how to create tile maps and trellis charts and small multiples. These are all things that you could do before, but maybe you'd use blending, or maybe you'd join some of that data in, or even create calculations. Well, now you can leverage data model, and that opens up some additional flexibility. And then we'll even talk about some ways that you might use this sort of technique to create some structured reports. So maybe your boss told you that you need to create a P&L report in Tableau and gave you a specific list of requirements in terms of how it should be laid out. That doesn't sound like a lot of fun to do in Tableau, but actually using some of these scaffolding techniques, we'll see that, that we have a lot more flexibility than we used to. All right, so let's move into this. And what we'll do is we'll start with some election data, because everyone loves elections. Actually, I've been having a lot of fun with it. I've been working with Steve Wexler, another Tableau Zen Master. We've been working with SurveyMonkey and looking at some of their polling data around the elections. So I know, and we're not going to look at that data specifically today, and I know that that it can be controversial, and it might be a little bit of a bold thing to tackle this kind of data today. I don't want to be divisive or anything, but we are going to look at the following data: Kirk versus Picard. It's tough, but we'll take a look. So as we think about how this might look, I'm going to pull up Tableau, and we're going to consider a data set. My data set is state by state, a list of polls, as well as a final result of Kirk versus Picard. Let's just take a look real quick at what the data kind of looks like. So you can see just every day, we've been asking the poll question, do you approve or disapprove of Kirk or Picard? And what does that percentage look like? So lots of data here. And it's going to be really interesting to dig into this data and see some of the trends and see where things have shifted, or what that final result even looks like. So in fact, that's maybe what I want to look at first. Maybe just the list of states, because or not just a list, but we've all been looking at maps of states. So I'm going to double click on state there. I'm going to see a dot for each state. Maybe I'll change that to a filled map. And then I'm going to jump straight to the final results. I'm going to just look at the at Kirk or Picard. So Kirk in the gold uniform, Picard in the red uniform, and now I can see where those states are in terms of the final results. I am going to notice something though. I have results for a lot of states, but there are some states that are missing, and they are completely missing from my data. In fact, I don't have any data for them, and so Tableau doesn't even draw a mark for them. I can kind of see where they should be based on the surrounding states, uh, but I don't actually get to see those particular states. Uh, and Tableau has no way of drawing those states because they don't even exist in my data. So where is Nevada? I don't know. Where is Pennsylvania? I don't know. It's not in my data. Tableau won't draw it, but I can use some data scaffolding techniques to actually fill in that missing data. In fact, if I were to edit this data source, what I could do is add a list of the full states, and I've got that in a text file. So you'll see here's my current data set that we took a brief look at. Now this is the new Tableau data model. We're looking at the logical layer here. If I drill into what's called extract here, I'll see that that's actually just a single table, and that's the preview that I'm looking at here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add that full list of states. I've got mine in a text file, but you might have yours in a database, or who knows, but it could be any data source. It doesn't matter what. I can just add that as another possibility here. And I'm going to link that with my existing data with a relationship. So you can see this little flexible noodle that kind of appears. It's different than the old join, which was just a straight line. This is indicating that it's a new relationship model. So the great thing about that is that when I place that in there and I set up the relationship correctly, which Tableau got it right on the first try because it saw that state is in both. I've got my full list of states, but I don't have to tell it what kind of join this is. I don't have to say it's an inner join or an outer join or left, right. I don't tell it. Tableau, based on how I construct my view, it's going to use the correct joins behind the scenes, and it's going to do it at an aggregate level, kind of like blending. But I'm not going to have to worry about the fact that some of my states are not going to be in my extract, even though I've got the full list here. So I don't have to worry about trying to do some sort of a full outer join or something and then build in a lot of logic. Tableau knows that already based on that relationship. So now, if I go to a new sheet and I say I want to create a map with the full domain of states, notice that my data set now has my original extract with state there, but that's not the state I want because I'm missing some. Now I've got my my new full state list here, and notice if I double click that one and switch it to a filled map, you'll see all the states are there. Nevada is there, Pennsylvania is there, and this is great because now I can start to do some things with these. Now, if I come back here and I say, okay, let's look at the final result then, state by state. I'm going to drag in the final result, place that on color. So now it looks just like our original map. We're missing some of the states again. Why? Well, because Tableau Data Model looks for optimization, and it says, hey, you're using a dimension from this table and you're using a dimension from this table, and because they're we're going to try to match them up, but where there's not a match, we won't show anything because we don't have to show anything. So Tableau optimized that. But I want to show Nevada. I want to show Pennsylvania, because what if I really want to make this this map look nice and clean, and I go to the layers and I do something like wash it out completely or turn off all the layers here. Now Yeah, I still get the outline for Nevada, but what if I wanted to annotate some of these states? I could annotate Florida pretty easily. Just right click it and say annotate mark. But if I wanted to annotate Pennsylvania, for example, I don't have a mark even there. So in order to force Tableau to use the full domain, all I have to do is pick out a measure from the table where that full domain is and bring that in. Now, the only measure I have here is just the count of records in the table. But if I just drag and drop that in, watch what happens to those missing states. Now they're filled in. Now I get a mark. Now, is it Picard? Is it Kirk? No, it's neither. It's null. But I do get that mark, and I do get to see that those states, they do exist, but they don't have a final result, at least not yet. And so ultimately, I might take all of that and place it into a dashboard that looks something like this. And you'll notice I've done a couple of things. One thing, I've actually taken 3 views to account for the fact that Alaska and Hawaii kind of distort the size of some of the states. I've added some tooltips so I can kind of see the trends over time. So I can see, which state liked Picard most. Oh, there's some interesting crossover over time. But then I see the ultimate end result. And now I can do things like take Pennsylvania. Notice I don't get a tooltip there, at least not anything that there's no data for the Vision tooltip, but I can do something like annotate that particular point, and I can I could show the results or even just make a note. And so I'd put that note in there just so we know why that state's not there. But I wouldn't have been able to do that if I didn't have a mark to use. So that's one thing that I can do with this relationship model is complete the domain fully. So I had a partial domain of states, but now I have the full domain, and I still am able to use all the data from that original data set very nicely. Now you may look at this, and I look at this, and I think, okay, this is very similar to what I'm seeing on every news website right now. They show everything geographically, which makes sense. As an American, I know a lot of the states, maybe not all of them, but I at least know where my state is and the surrounding states and some of the key states. So I look at that, and it's helpful to me. But there are some problems with this kind of a visualization as well. I've accounted for some of them. Alaska and Hawaii are problematic because of their position and size, but it still doesn't help with the size of some things like where's DC or Rhode Island, or I can't easily see those. I'd have to zoom in or out. And then also, we've seen some of the problems with the fact that, yeah, I'm filling in land area, but that doesn't necessarily correspond to the number of people in those states, which when we're counting votes for Kirk or Picard, that's what's really important. So I might think of some alternative visualizations that help me keep some of that geographic relationship intact, but that solve some of the problems that we just went through. One possibility would be a hex map, and I really love those. But another possibility would be something like a tile map. So let's look at how we could use data model to build out a tile map. And if you're wondering what a tile map is, well, we'll find out as we build it. So let's go back to our data set here. Now in this case, I actually have a data set that has all the states, so we'll assume that. But if I look at how can I list those states out, if I were to place them on rows, for example, I'd get a row for every state, or columns, I'd get a column for every state. What I would like to do is I'd like to arrange rows and columns where the states kind of build out this this tile grid that roughly resembles the United States, but every state gets a square that's an equal size. So I don't have that built into this data set. I could maybe create a calculation or something like that, but that's going to be really tedious. So instead, I'm going to go back to the idea of using data model to create a relationship with a data source that does define that row or column. And so in fact, let's start from scratch. I've walked through it already, but I'll remove that. If I were to add in a data set, I do have a file that defines rows and columns for every state with roughly the right position. And I actually need to give credit to Brittany Fong for this. She created this original file. I've modified it just ever so slightly. But if we were to look at it, it's just a CSV. But if we were to pull that up, you'd see it's just a data set that gives us the abbreviation for the state itself, and then a row and column position where I want to draw that state. So pretty simple data set, but very powerful in what it allows us to do. I'm going to add that in. And people have been doing this for a long time in Tableau, but up until data model, you'd have to do it with blending or maybe joining it in or something. But this is great because now all I have to do is just relate it to my data set. And I don't have to, given the relationship, I don't have to worry about if I have the full domain or not. In fact, this will be great because this will give me the full domain. I don't have to worry about inner, outer, left, right, join. I'll let Tableau take care of all of that in the background. I do have to worry that the state name matches. So if I had a mismatch, I'd have to correct it in the data source, or potentially I can create a relationship calculation if I need to do some string manipulation or fix some of the values or something. I can potentially do that. But this should give us a lot of flexibility. If I come back to tile map now I've got my original data set here. I've got my additional tile map information here with row and column. I'm going to recategorize those as dimensions. So I'm going to drag and drop them up as dimensions because I don't want to add up rows and columns. I just want to use them as rows or columns. So row on rows, column on columns. And you can see already that kind of, if you squint hard enough, looks like the United States. I can see Florida hanging out there. That's probably Texas, Maine, Alaska, Hawaii. But we'll find out what they are exactly as we start to build out the data itself. Now, I already kind of have the idea of a square per state. If I were to bring in the final result on color, you can see Tableau actually even defaults to a square. And I could play around with the size. It's going to depend a little bit on how tall and wide I make my data set here. One trick that I picked up, and I don't even remember who showed it to me, but if I place a blank here, and copy it here, it's going to constrain the squares so that I can just take it up to the full size. And now no matter how I size it, it should show up correctly. And this kind of a tile map then allows me to see the same sort of geographic distributions, but I can start to see where is Rhode Island or DC. I can start to see those on the map. Oh, Tableau switched to text, but we wanted to stay on squares. Yeah, so there's Rhode Island, much easier to find. There's DC, much easier to find. And I can start to look at, you know, how many liked Kirk, how many liked Picard. Maybe edit my label to make that a little bit more readable. Maybe make the state label bold, and then oh no, that's the abbreviation. Let's make that bold. Rearrange it just a bit. That's Kirk. That's Picard. Center everything and center it here as well. And so now I can start to see, you know, how did Kirk and Picard show up at the very end. And wow, I've got all the states now, so that works out pretty well, depending on whether you wanted Picard or Kirk. And then this kind of a concept, I could clean up the formatting, remove the grid lines, not show headers, that sort of thing. So I could eventually get this to look even nicer than what it looks now, but it was very easy to create. And that was using a data scaffolding technique. Using a similar technique to that, I could build something even more complex. How about something like this? A trellis chart, or maybe we still call it a tile map, but it's a small multiples of line charts, so that I can actually see for each state, Kirk or Picard over time, and that becomes very interesting to look at and to think about. Speaking of small multiples, that's another possibility for this type of technique. So if I were to switch data sources one more time, let's go to just the old standard sample superstore that ships with Tableau. And let's say that I want to look at something kind of similar to what we just saw with that trellis chart, but I want it to be a small multiples chart of sales over time. So if I took sales and looked over time, oh, it doesn't like that. Let's find our oh, let's edit the data source. Yeah, Tableau is already a step ahead of us because we don't. All right, we'll just do this because it's looking for a file that's not there yet. All right, let's remove it and we'll come back to it. All right, so let's try again. Sales, yeah, there's sales. And then over time, let's look at it by order date. And I'm going to right click, drag and drop onto columns so that I can select from my date parts and date values. I'm going to select a date value of month. And then if I were to look at this and think about looking at it by subcategory. So if I were to just drop subcategory onto rows, I could get a line chart per subcategory, and that's somewhat helpful. In fact, if I were to tighten it up and kind of work on it a little bit, you could even think of this as maybe a sparklines kind of visualization, and that's very helpful at times to think about that sort of thing. I'm going to come into category. Yeah, we're on office supplies, so that's good. But it's still, you know, I could still have to scroll through it, or maybe I could tighten it up enough to see a bunch. But what if I wanted this to be a true small multiples where it has, you know, I think I've got 9 rows. So I could do like a 3x3 grid. Well, I could create some calculations for row and column and try to make it dynamic, or I could just build a real quick data set that has all of my subcategories. So I'm just going to do that by copying the data here. Just grab all the subcategories, copy, and then just building it really quickly in something like Excel. Now, of course, if your data was in a relational database, you could do this with a custom query or build out a view or something like that. But here, I'm just going to copy, paste, and then just build out rows and columns. So row across there, another row across, and then one more row. So we have 3 rows. And then within each row, we're going to have 3 columns. All right, so I will save that. and we'll save it maybe where we can find it. And this will just be our office supplies, small multiples. And then in a very similar way to what we've seen before, I'll edit the data source. You can see that this data source is already using data model to relate people and returns. That's just fine. You can add this this kind of a data scaffolding into existing data models as well. So let's choose Excel. There's my office supplies small multiples that I just created. And yeah, we just called it sheet 1, that's fine. So I bring that in and notice that because I used an existing field and it's named the same, Tableau already knows that that relationship is on subcategory and it's going to have the row and the column. And I'll come back to my small multiples here, take that off. But now under sheet 1, I have row and column. So in a very similar way to before, I'm going to recategorize those. And this time I'll just double click and just pop them up there, something like that. And now I can start to look at it, sales and over time. So order date, we'll look at it by month again. And now you can see I have my 3x3 grid. And it's looking pretty good. But you look at it and you think, well, wait a minute, which one is this? Is this which category or subcategory are we looking at? It's a little bit hard to tell, but there are some ways that I could get that in there. One quick way, I could just drag the subcategory on the label or something like that, and you could start to see maybe wherever Tableau decides that it can actually place that in there without overlapping. So that would kind of work. But another possibility would be something like this. What if I took sales and created another measure real quick, just ad hoc, just something like min of 1. Notice that what that does is that just places a line in here, and I could label that line with subcategory. So I place that on label. And now, no, but I don't want it on everything. I just want it on just that line. So I'm going to click there. Let's try that again, subcategory on label. And then I might edit that label to say only show it at the beginning of each line. Let's make it consistent. Let's always allow it to overlap. And then I'll make this a dual axis. So right click that one, make that a dual axis, and notice that I'm always going to get the label, but I also get this line that who wants to see that line? Well, I don't necessarily, so I could just take that and make it completely transparent, and now I've got my label. I might adjust even a few other things, take that off the color. Yeah, I'll still see it when I hover over it, but even that could be interesting because I could add in a tooltip or something to talk about the date and talk about what's going on. So there are all kinds of possibilities for what to do with that. But this is one way to get that kind of small multiple, and then clean it up by hiding headers, adjusting grid lines, making the label on that line even nicer, maybe even adjusting the scale of the axis to move that label up a little bit, or even just adjust it here. We could adjust the alignment to move it up a bit. Yeah, so all kinds of things you could do to potentially clean it up. But this kind of a small multiple works really well, and takes something that was a lot of rows and gives me an ability to see it even a little bit nicer. And what's really great is I can edit the type of visualization very easily. So I could look at this as an area graph. I could look at it as, you know, I can make a small multiple of a scatter plot. So all kinds of really cool things you can do with small multiples. In fact, I could even do something similar and do a small multiples of maps. So if I were to look at my states, for example. Maybe sales by state. And then bring in my row and column. Notice that I can even get a small multiple of maps so that I could see, what's going on geographically by each one of those subcategories. So all kinds of really cool things you can do with that. And once you have the scaffold in place in your data connection, you can use it over and over and over again. In fact, we might even think about doing something really complex with it, and that is, what if we were given a data set, something like this. So I've got a data set going back to that idea of Kirk and Picard and Star Trek. What if I had a data set like this? It's got different starships and then a bunch of different measures that might be going on. So shield energy, phaser energy, all kinds of things. How many photon torpedoes do they have? Possibly a very interesting type of data set. But what if I'm told that I need to create a report that looks something like this? Maybe not the most interesting way to visualize it, but often you'll run into reporting requirements that force you to have very specific layouts of the data, especially when you come. I've found it a lot in financial reporting. There is a very specific way that the people want to see their financial reporting. They want to divide it up by things that take power, and then get a total, but then also what are weapons, and let's show that. And what's interesting is that the phasers, actually, that might be the same field. If I look at the data, I'm going to find that I only have phasers in there once, and then percent of total, but that only applies to things that are part of the energy balance, not things that are weapons. So all kinds of interesting requirements and exceptions and things that are kind of difficult. This section has a total, this section does not. Maybe there are even cases where certain ships don't have quantum torpedoes. So, all kinds of interesting things to think about. And that goes back to the idea of that domain completion. Well, one thing that I can do is I can think about how I might tackle it in Tableau, just with the raw data set. So if I looked at just that raw data set and I said, okay, I need all of my energy together. So here's things that take energy, and I start to bring those in, and then I might think about, how would I get a total of that? Well, I could create a calculation that adds all of those sums up and gives me a total. I can't just bring in a total line because they're all different measures. Maybe I would restructure this data. That might make it easier to work with. But I still would have trouble with getting the percents next to the values, but only in one section. In fact, I can't even get the percents at all with the structure that I have. So this is actually a very difficult kind of an issue. But what if I took that report definition that looked like this, and I took it and just kind of made it a little bit easier for Tableau to consume with something like this. So I've taken each one of those sections, so that energy balance, and I've said, okay, here's that section, and then weapons is the other section. And then within that, I've got certain line items that I want to see. I want to see shields and phasers, life support, warp drive, and other, but I also want to see that total. And then for weapons, these are the three that I have. So going back to the sheet, all I've done really is just taken this value, filled it down, taken this value, filled it down, and then added in one additional column that's the order. That's going to make it really easy for me to keep that order in Tableau. So what I've done is I've just taken a report structure and turned it into metadata that I'm going to use to build out this report. So in Tableau, I'm going to edit my data source. I've got my Starship data, but I'm going to add to it this report structure for my Starship report. And so I'm going to pull in the report structure. Now, here's the interesting thing on this noodle, this relationship. What do I relate on? Because all I've got in my report structure is just the line number, the section, the order. I don't have any of that in my original data. Well, that's totally fine, because all I'm going to do is I'm going to create a relationship calculation that just relates the data together at the entire data set level. So one on this side, create a data relationship calculation here, one on this side. And so that just gives me a relationship to work with. And you can see it's brought in my data. And let's take a look at how this might work. So I come into to a new sheet here, and notice I've got my report structure here. I've got my original data set here, and I can start to think through how would I build this. I've got my section, I've got the line items on the report. I did have a few extra things in the report that came up null, so I'm going to just exclude those. Probably go back and clean that up at some point. And then I had a very specific order that was given to me about building this report, so I built that into my data source. I've got the order there, and I can say, let's sort the line items based on that field. So that will get them all in the right order. And then I can start to think about, how do I take all of these and bring them up here? I want to show the value and I want to show the percentage. Well, in order to show the value, I can create a calculated field like this. That's just the value that I want to show on the report. And it's going to depend on which line of the report that I'm looking at. But when it's shields, then I want to show shield energy. When it's phasers, then phaser energy. When it's life support, then life support energy, and so on. So I could spend all day typing that, but I did actually do it a little bit ahead of time. So where did it go? There's my value. Let's edit this, copy the whole thing, and go back here and edit this calculation. And so you can see that builds it out completely, but there's one piece that I didn't have, and that is, what if it's the total energy line? What do we do there? So we'll have to actually create a calculation called total energy. That'll be invalid until we get there. But here's another thing that I'm able to do fairly easily, and that is, I was supposed to report phasers up here, and I'm supposed to report phasers down here again. I can reuse the same field in multiple sections of the report. So I'm going to say, okay, here I need to go, I need to build out that total energy. I'll just copy the calculation here and bring it back to this data source, and then we'll take a look at it. So I'll paste it in. Notice that fixed my value there. But total energy is just adding together all of those fields, life support, phaser, shields, and so on. So all of these add up to the total. And then that value said, when it's the total line, the total energy, then that's what we'll use, is total energy. So now I can bring that value up there. And notice that I get the value added up. It adds up to the total within that section. I get all the right values here, but I don't have a total here, and that's fine. The report didn't call for it. So I've started to build this out very nicely. But now I was also told, well, show energy as a percentage. We don't show weapons as a percentage, but show the energy as a percentage. How can I do that? Well, if I were to create another calculation, and I wanted to just say this is value as a percent, or not even value, this is energy as a percent, then if I'm in the energy balance section, so if the section equals energy balance, then it's my value divided by my total energy. Right, and I won't do that for weapons. Now, the one thing that I'm going to run into is that I need to treat this, since it's adding up a percentage. I don't want to calculate percentages and then add. I want to add the numerator first and add the denominator. So I'm going to put a summer on both of those. And then as soon as I do that, Tableau complains, well, you referenced section, but that's a row level value, and these are aggregate values. You can't mix those together. So I need to turn section into some kind of an aggregate. Min or max will work just fine. So energy as a percent, I'll say okay. Now if I were to bring that up there, it's just going to show a bunch of zeros probably. So I'm going to make sure we're showing it as a percentage first. And as soon as I bring it up there now I get that percentage, but only in that top section. The bottom ones are all null, and that's great. I just have to reorder it to make it look like the report. And so now I've started to build out this report. It looks really nice, and I've got some additional flexibility that I might never have had if I had tried to use, for example, build out 2 or 3 different views. So previously in Tableau, I might have thought, well, let's build out this first part with the value, and then have to make another sheet with weapons, and then another sheet that has the percentage, and then we'll put them all together on a dashboard. But then my boss would say, oh, well, now you need to break it up by ship. And I would have really struggled because, oh man, now I've got to do that. 3 sheets turns into 6 sheets because I have 3 ships, but now it's just drag and drop. So I can just bring ship on here and say each ship has certain values, has percentage of energy usage, and has weapons, and I can totally rearrange that however I like, and it works very well because it's all built into that data model, and I've just given myself a framework. I've just given myself a very nice scaffold to build that data on. So that's just a taste of what we can do with data scaffolding, with scaffolding using data model. There are all kinds of fun things that you can do. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. So if you think of anything, write them into the chat. I do see a couple, so I'll start to think about that. Nabil asks, does this work for intersects, which is geographic data or geospatial data? So I didn't quite catch when that was asked, but I'm wondering if that was back in the tile map, or thinking about relationships as a whole. Can I create relationships using geospatial? So the short answer is no, at least not right now. So if I edit a data source and look at that noodle in the relationship, I can build it based on equality between fields or calculations. I can even use inequality or greater than, less than, that sort of thing. But I don't have the ability, at least right now, to say a spatial intersection of data, which you do have at the physical layer. So if I drill into here and go to the physical layer, now if I add in some sort of a table to create a join, now you would see, well, I don't have any spatial data here, but if I did, you would see an intersects, and I could say where the spatial object here intersects the spatial object here. That would work fine, but not at the relationship level, unfortunately. But possibly something that Tableau may consider adding in the future. All right, another question. Could you, in theory, pivot the measures and then use the pivot name on the noodle relationship to the line and then pivot the value on the table? So unfortunately not. What I don't have the ability to say in a relationship, let's take all of these measures and then pivot. I can pivot. Well, now I may come back and say, oh, look at that. Actually, maybe I could. I love webinars where I learn something too. So that's awesome. I did not expect that to work. So yeah, that would be great, because then you could actually build out your report structure with some of those pivoted field names, and that might even simplify things more. Now you'll run into cases where, for example, here I want phasers to be used twice. That could end up causing some strange behaviors, which I'd have to think through if you're actually building the relationship on that field name. So I'd have to think about the implications there. But yeah, I mean, we have just scratched the surface, and we're all going to be learning new things as we go along. So that's really cool. Any other questions? I don't see any others yet. I'll give you another 30 seconds or so. All right, no questions are showing up. Well, if you do think of something before we end, oh, here's one more. This is the last one. Do you see it worth to rebuild reports that used blends previously? That totally depends. So it makes it much easier to use the Tableau data model. The question would be, if your reports that you built previously, or anything that you built previously using a blend, there would be several things I would evaluate to determine, do I rebuild it using data model? First thing would be, does it work with Tableau data model? The answer to that is probably yes, but there could be some cases where the blend actually was the better way to go, even if data model had been an option. But assuming that the data model would be better, then the second thing I would ask is it worth it from the standpoint of, is it something that I have to maintain, and is it changing often, and will it save time in the long run to move its data model? If the answer is yes on that, and the return on investment of time makes sense, then absolutely I would do that. If it's something that's working and it's one of those, if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of things, maybe not. So you'll have to decide that. Other sources for learning scaffolding. Oh man, there are so many good ones out there. Ken and Kevin Flairledge, they have some great stuff on scaffolding. Yeah, I referenced Brittany Fong earlier. She was doing a lot with scaffolding. There is a lot out there just in the community. Google is a great place to start. But yeah, there's a lot, and then as you go, you'll discover new things. And data model is so new. We're all figuring it out and learning new things as we go. Well, it's been a pleasure as usual. Thank you all for joining, and I look forward to our next encounter. In the meantime, feel free to reach out and let me know if there's anything that I can help with, or anything that Teknion can help with. Uh, and if not, we'll see you next time.